If you're not ready to run through a brick wall after hearing from new head coach of Oregon State, JaMarcus Shephard, well, you better check your pulse. Yes, welcome on into the Pac-12 Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao. Let's get right into it. JaMarcus Shephard, the new head coach at Oregon State, and this guy is exciting. He's a motivator, he's a great speaker, and he's going to bring some very fun times to the Beavers program. Ryan Harlan of Beavers Edge on 3 joins me for this conversation. And he spoke for an entire hour. Well, the press conference was an entire hour for his opening introduction. It was exciting. You can tell that you're going to have a lot to discuss over the next couple of years as the head coach. What was your initial thoughts of JaMarcus Shephard becoming the new head coach for Oregon State?
I mean, first off, brick walls are now an endangered species in Corvallis, so
Yes.
there is that. I have ran through several metaphorical brick walls, and we have not reached August yet. But no, like in all seriousness, all jokes aside, Shepard won the press conference yesterday. Like that was kind of the expectation, I think, going into it. Mm-hmm. But really, you could tell that he is ready to hit the ground running. He has a plan, ready to go. He wants to be here. That was one of the things that he really, really stressed. He was like, yeah, I knew other people wanted this job, but I wanted this job more than them. Talked about his coaching philosophy, thanked his family, players, just a really like a guy that you kind of now got to at least take a look at behind the curtain a little bit of JaMarcus Shephard is not only a person, but also as a coach, and why he's had such like high glowing praise of him. And that's not to say that like going into that press conference, I didn't really know what to expect. It was more just seeing it for the first time. And to me, like, I think the biggest takeaway I had was the energy that he brings, and he wants alumni back in Reser and around the program too, especially Beaver football legends like a Tim Ewis, Chad Johnson, TJ Hushmanzada, like those guys to come back around and be in those meetings and help enhance the Oregon State student athlete experience, especially being a part of the football program. Like that's something to me that I think really stood out. And I think for a lot of Oregon State fans, after kind of what this past year was, that shot of energy was well needed. Like you need somebody that can come in, be a little bit of a football psycho to like get you motivated and riled up. And I think that's what Shepard has kind of shown, that in this kind of hour press conference that he had, of just being able to bring some life back into a program that kind of so desperately needed it after Jonathan Smith left to Michigan State.
And obviously him getting fired just a couple days afterwards, of course, Jonathan Smith name not being involved in there, but JaMarcus Shephard being in there. Just got to throw that in there one time. Interesting stuff. You're right, though. Magnetic personality, really fun stuff you saw from him in the presser. And if you've ever been an athlete, or if you've ever just been on any sort of team and you watch this presser, I feel like you're going to get motivated. Like I was ready. Like I was sitting at the edge of my seat. I was starting to get like my hairs were rising on my arms. This guy knows what he's doing. I could only imagine, being a player for him in the locker room and in the meetings. Like he really understands how to get you engaged, and that's exciting stuff. And you mentioned you need that shot of energy after what has happened over the last couple seasons at Oregon State. He's got an interesting story. You mentioned that come from his poverty, and then he turns into this type of coach, and it's just exciting stuff. And he really focused on, in the conversation that I noticed, that he wants to not just grow these guys on the field, but as actual people. He really focused on the entire person of a football player, how he wants to coach just actual men. Talked about how academics was important to him. And you don't usually hear that these days from coaches. Do you hear more of just the performance thing? You're right. It sounds like it's going to be a full on-board thing from his coaching staff, especially for head coach JaMarcus Shephard.
Oh yeah, and especially the one thing I want to add to that is being a former athlete and kind of being in similar shoes to a degree. Like for myself, I was never the tallest, never the fastest, never the most athletic. I had to like work at I was a swimmer in high school, so I had to work at it and kind of find how to get better to be up to that level of those guys. And and Shepard was saying like, yeah, I'm gonna go in there and outwork you. And I was like, oh, like hearing all that coming out of his mouth during the press conference, I was like, all right, you're speaking my language. Like that's exactly what motivates me too.
Yeah.
And not only from that aspect, but like the fact that he mentioned his scholarship was not even an athletic one, it was an academic scholarship in the press conference, and stressing like not only is, you know, coaching important, but also teaching the game of football and academics in terms of being not only, you know, a good student but also a good athlete out on the field. So to me, those things kind of help make a very well-rounded athlete, and that's what really Shepard preaches and kind of his philosophy of coaching. And you see that in all of his previous stops, from Washington State to UW to Alabama, Western Kentucky, Purdue. Like you see that kind of leave an imprint there, and why guys kind of have been like, yeah, we want Coach Shep back to help coach our program. Like, so those are really kind of positive things I think you can hang your hat on, in spite of, you know, maybe the resume isn't quite as robust with head coaching experience, but the fact that you have somebody that is very magnetic and can command a room like Shepard does, I think it's something that Oregon State hasn't had in quite some time. I mean, maybe the closest thing you could maybe say would be Dennis Erickson or Mike Riley a little bit in terms of personality wise. Like, but outside of that, like I just think that what you have kind of trumps a lot of the concerns that people might have when they look at Shepard coming in without
Yeah.
any significant head coaching experience.
Your athletic director of Oregon State, Scott Barnes, mentioned that he checks all the boxes when talking about the hiring. He obviously had some really other cool things to say. He even brought a letter from like his middle school teacher to talk about how great of a person he is. They really focused on that in the presser. But he talked about how they checked all the boxes. One of them, obviously, that wasn't checked, but it looked like they passed on from it, was head coaching experience. That's going to be one of the biggest questions that you ask all offseason long until the very first game is done. Is that one thing that he does not have is head coaching experience. He's been the wide receiver coach at Alabama. He's the wide receiver coach for Washington State, as you mentioned. He has Pacific Northwest experience. That's important, especially when it comes to recruiting. And just, you know, it's a completely different life out in the Pacific Northwest. But overall, he's not a head coach, at least in that mind. He is now. Does that change your thought process on it? Does that concern you at all after the way that Oregon State just left a brand new first-time head coach and then moving to another one? Or does that not really worry you at all?
No, I think the only thing I really want to see, I think, going forward in the offseason is just who Shepard picks as a defensive coordinator, because the expectation from sources telling myself and Beavers Edge that he's going to bring in Mitch Dolan, who's an analyst at Alabama right now. Dolan is a Redmond, Oregon native. He's helped develop some top tier quarterbacks in college football, including Michael Penix, Jake Hayner, Ty Simpson, but the lack of play calling experience is very minimal for Dolan. But like if you could pair, you know, someone opposite of Dolan on the defensive side of the ball that's been a head coach and is a defensive coordinator, I think that's something that, you know, will be very beneficial, I think, to Shepard in year one. But outside of just kind of my own sort of self-interest in the defensive coordinator position, I think the way that Shepard is going about it is completely different than I think Trent Bray and the previous staff did. There seems to be more of a concrete plan with Shepard and how he wants to build out the roster, what his vision for the defensive side of the ball is, what the offensive vision for that side of the ball is as well, how he wants to recruit, making more of an emphasis and a focus on, hey, the nucleus of our team needs to be local kids here in Oregon. 5-hour radius is what he called it in the press conference. You may have to go maybe slightly beyond that, but you know, like that's what he was kind of preaching there, of like, this is what we want to do. And to me, that shows that there is more of a concrete, solid foundation to get the ball rolling in year one right off the bat than probably what it was with Trent Bray at the helm. And that's something where I kind of have, not as much concerns as I once did. It's more of a just I think you need to just see what kind of happens with the hirings of the staff and how the roster shakes out, because obviously we're right now in early signing day. There are recruits getting added and there will be more over time. And then we get the transfer portal. So there's going to be an influx of talent coming in and there's going to be an influx of talent going out. So it's a matter of, I think, just how everything else shakes out will be the biggest determinant rather for kind of what Shepard's success looks like in year one at Oregon State.
And it's at such an interesting time too, right? You're starting the brand new and improved, if you wanted to call it, the Pac-12 in July of 2026. He's going to be taking over. Excuse me. He's going to be taking over the coach then in 2026. But let's be honest, this team is still 2-10, right? There's still obviously a lot to improve on. He said he spoke to the players. One of the things he mentioned was straight up saying, quote, "We are not a disciplined football team." That was what the main thing that he took from. Do you see this being something about maybe the same style as Washington State, where they brought in 75 new players to try and get themselves to be a team that did make a bowl game? Do you think the direction you're going to see this offseason, especially more than all the rest, as they get ready to start year one under Shepard, to get themselves back to being a relevant team inside this new Pac-12? And do you even see it potentially being as a contender in year one?
I'm a little more holding some reservations on that, just because remember, like you said, 2-10, undisciplined football team. But I think in terms of roster turnover, you might see maybe about that amount. Wow. I don't know the exact number, but that's kind of the expectation that I was told to expect for when the portal opens up officially in January. So there's going to be a different football team, I think, in 2026. And it's more of, I just think what pieces you can pull if you're Shepard and the rest of his coaching staff to kind of supplement any talent from last year that leaves in the portal, because that's going to be really big and I think going to be really telling, in addition just to the kind of coaches that Shepard surrounds himself with. And that's not to say that, this team can't do it, right? Obviously, you got to play out the games and so on and so forth. But like, there is precedent of teams in year one having a master roster turnover and either making it to a conference championship game or being on just the outside of making a conference championship game, which talking about the University of New Mexico in this case, who had a massive roster turnover and nearly missed out on the Mountain West Championship because of tiebreakers. But like, that's obviously, a case by case basis that we're talking about here. So there needs to be more of, I think, just seeing what hires come about and then what other talent Shepard is going to bring in order to get a good picture, I think, of where they stand within the new Pac-12 in 2026, because Scott Barnes and Shepard are in lockstep and think that this program can compete at the top of the Pac-12 next year. Then you got to make sure that the roster construction and the coaches are, at the top of the conference, or some of the best coaches in that conference next year.
Let's look into the future a little bit. Obviously, they haven't played a single game yet. They haven't even really had a single day together yet, because he's going to go back and coach Alabama this week in the SEC championship. Then he'll return. But let's look into the future a little bit. Obviously, we can't talk about new head coaches at Oregon State without talking about past head coaches at Oregon State. And so one thing that has been a narrative over the last couple of times, with the exception of Trent Bray because he was fired, is that it's been utilized. Oregon State's head coaching job has been utilized as, dare I say, a stepping stone to another job inside of Oregon State. It hasn't worked out great. The grass isn't always greener. We've seen that happening, obviously, with the firing of Jonathan Smith this week as well at Michigan State. Do you see this, just your speculation here, hypothetical, Do you see this as JaMarcus Shephard using Oregon State as a stepping stone, or something you can see him actually build upon as being the first-time head coach here in Corvallis?
I don't necessarily view stepping stone in quite a negative sense, and that's
Sure.
more of because if you're a first time head coach, you want to eventually make it to the top. All coaches do. All coaches are competitors, right? So I don't necessarily look at that in more of a bad sense. I think the concern that people had with Shepard coming into this was, oh, he's a young and upcoming coach and he might use this to leave us and go somewhere else. But you're not going to get a for lifer anymore. And also
Agreed.
too, like if Shepard takes, say 4 years to turn around this program and Oregon State's back where it was in 2023 under Jonathan Smith, then you leave it in a better place than what you found it in. If you're JaMarcus Shephard, right? Like then you go on and you find the next guy. So that's something to me where that doesn't really, I think, bother me too much if Shepard were to do that. I think, you just kind of take it year by year and see kind of what happens in that regard. But you are right, though. Like previous head coaches, including Jonathan, Mike Riley, and Dennis Erickson, the grass has not been greener for them. Like Dennis Erickson famously said, like leaving Oregon State was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. So it might be one of those where you just kind of don't know how far into the future things will look with how Shepard turns this program around. I mean, he's working in a better situation at least than Jonathan had when he took over from Gary Anderson. But if it's a quick turnaround and Shepard goes off somewhere else, hey, like you go the Tulane route, right? You Willie Fritz leaves, and then you go get John Summerall, and Summerall now has obviously left for the Florida job, but they're going to go find somebody to replace Summerall there. So that's the nature of college football in a nutshell. So yeah, like I just don't buy into the whole for lifer thing anymore just because of how college football's evolved over the years. But like if Shepard stays after the end of his contract and he gets an extension, cool. Hey, like I'm not going to be upset by that by any stretch of the means. But like I think you just kind of play it as you do with any coach, and if there is success, I think Shepard will probably earn himself a nice, well-deserved contract extension because, man, like the only way to go from here now is up, right? Like special teams in particular, that unit finished last per PFF by a wide margin. So there's going to be a massive turnaround there in that department that Shepard and his coaching staff are going to have to undertake there. But like, I look at it as a just you kind of look at how long you have him under contract for and then go from there after that.
A couple more here as we finish up this episode of the Pac-12 Daily. Really appreciate you stopping by. Ryan Harlan of Beavers Edge of On3, covering the Oregon State Beavers, and he's going to be busy for the next couple of years. The way that JaMarcus Shephard has some of these conversations, he's fun. He's not afraid to talk, and it's exciting stuff. Lots of things to discuss here. On the flip side, though, Scott Barnes, obviously the athletic director of Oregon State, there was lots of criticism from him with how he handled the Trent Bray firing. He was obviously the one that made this decision to hire JaMarcus Shephard. Is this a make or break hire for him as the athletic director of this program?
I would say so, and that scrutiny was warranted with not only how he handled the Trent Bray firing, but just kind of how he responded to things with the 0-6 stretch, then to 0-7, the blueprint stuff as well too. And it was one of those where you needed to nail the hire. And that was something that I was saying prior to Shepard getting hired is you need to nail this hire and be able to turn this around as quickly as possible, because if you don't, I think you would see a lot of more fan apathy than last year. And that's something where I think getting a guy like Shepard to bring in energy, I think is really critical and really big to get butts back in seats. Because if, say, year one, right, is not the best record, but the offense is exciting, defense is also exciting too. Like, there's an exciting product out on the field. People are gonna go there and watch. Like, that's what people were kind of voting on last year. Was it wasn't exciting to go there and watch. It was boring. It was not fun to be there in Research Stadium, and now you have a new reason to do that. So I think nailing this hire is going to be really big for Barnes in terms of just what happened last year and just kind of the culmination of what a year that was supposed to be full of promise ended up being a lost football season where you finish 2-10. You cycle through three different quarterbacks in 2025, and you fire your head coach mid-season too. On top of that, so I definitely think it's going to be imperative for him to make sure that Shepard has the resources and the ability to succeed right away in year one.
As the wide receiver coach over his years, he's coached Rondale Moore, Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, David Bell, and obviously right now at Alabama, a guy named Ryan Williams. There's obviously the hope and prayers that he would enter the portal and head over to Oregon State. We'll go ahead and squash that now. No Ryan Williams is going to go to Oregon State unless you got to throw the entire bag at him. But what does a successful transfer portal window look like? Does he have to make huge splashes in year one? What looks successful for JaMarcus Shephard in year one for Oregon State?
In terms of just transfer portal additions, I think the biggest areas I think I want to see addressed are the offensive and defensive lines. Those two areas in the trenches in particular were kind of the point of scrutiny a lot of times for Beaver fans that they had. The offensive line in particular was not great coming into this season, and it was worse than I had envisioned because there was just no consistent group of five guys along that side of the ball that really Mike Cavanaugh and Ryan Gunderson felt comfortable with. So if you could build up the trenches, I think that's going to be really, really, really key. And then in terms of big splashes, I mean, you probably may want to go out and get a quarterback, maybe two, to kind of fill out that room, because I expect at least Malik Murphy to enter the portal, and then depending on what Jabari Johnson, Tristan Tia do with their decisions, either they stay or leave. Like, you go grab a guy to supplement them, leaving that room. But like, I don't think you necessarily need to like swing for like multiple 5 stars. Like, they just signed a Ole Miss commit. They flipped an Ole Miss commit that was a 4-star wide receiver to go come to Corvallis. So you can get 4 stars to come here. Like, that's something that's been done under Jonathan's tenure. Like, that's how you got Aiden Childs to come to come here, right? Like, I really do think that, if you can get some guys to fill out just any positions of need in particular, like the offensive and defensive lines, and maybe grab a couple of cornerstone pieces and some stop gaps at certain spots, like, maybe a 1-year stopgap at a special teams position at the long snapping position, right? Or have a defensive lineman that's a redshirt junior. Like, just get a good solid, I think, foundation in there in terms of roster construction. And then in terms of a successful season, I'd say maybe going 6-6, maybe a little optimistic, but just more of there's so many unknowns when we're having this conversation right now. Like, the rest of the staff needs to get filled out. Shepard also needs to figure out, what guys are staying, who are leaving, who he's bringing in from the portal, right? Like, those are the big factors there that I think, still kind of remain up in the air. But if you can go 6-6 after kind of what the last 2 years were, where you nearly missed out on bowl game in year 1 and you had the season that you did last year, I call it successful. So at least that gives you a good runway to gauge where this group is at.
It's so fun to watch how the expectations evolve over the next couple of months with how this team is going to build and develop. And I'm sure that's going to change, and who knows what that will change. But 6-6 right now does sound a lot nicer than 2-10. Ryan Harlan of Beavers Edge of On3, where can everyone find you and what kind of work you got coming up? I know you're busy with National Early Signing Day.
Yeah, no, we've been working sources and the phones constantly with early signing day, which kind of teased that, yeah, Beavers were able to flip that former Ole Miss commit to now come to Corvallis. So there is a bunch of additions that are going to come over into this 2026 class for Shepard and this coaching staff. It's going to get better over the course of time as well too. So we'll see what happens in the next couple days. So, and all that stuff you can find on beaversedge.com, and then you can find all my posts and tweets at Ryan_Harlan7. So
I
yeah,
love
got
it.
a
The
lot of.
maybe the memes stop. If the football gets better, the memes stop, or you just got to find a way to be more creative. What's that mean?
I got to challenge myself now
Yeah.
to figure that out. I mean, like the fact that I put in for my article to start out was brick walls are now an endangered species in
I love it.
Corvallis. Like that tells you, like, I gotta go back to the mill and figure out what's a new way to get excited about this football team this year under new leadership.
And I think JaMarcus Shephard's going to give you plenty of reasons to do that. I'm excited. As I mentioned, if you are not excited about a guy like JaMarcus Shephard after hearing him talk, you might want to check your pulse. And just because football is ending right now at the beginning of the end of the season for teams like Oregon State, it doesn't mean the news stops here. We'll be talking a lot more on the Pac-12 Daily, a lot more stuff coming very soon on the channel. So thank you so much. We'll see you back here next time. Take care.